I was with Deloitte. Most audit firms that time were very transactional focused. And one of the big differences that I saw at Deloitte was moving from a transactional focus to a very controls, compliance kind of focus when you're doing audits. And that was a big difference that I saw, and that helped change my perspective of the profession as well. Because I came from a small town, and the way things happened at Deloitte in a very structured way, and what one had seen or heard about the way things were done in audit firms, one saw it very differently with Deloitte, the way it happened, and that translated into a lot of aspects of the training. So focus more on controls and compliances, as I said, but also things like risk, focusing on issues linked with the macro environment rather than looking at the very micro stuff. And that was one big difference I saw, apart from a very structured way of approaching audits. So you started with things like preparing a permanent audit file, as it was called then, with flowcharts, actually putting down all the systems that were in place in a company, and then identifying gaps, and then that's where the audit started. So that was a very different approach one felt that time, as opposed to what one saw in most firms. I think one of the best ones was that if you're going into the industry, and which is what I plan to do, then was that don't look at finance as an accounting, pure accounting profession. And particularly if you're going into the industry, it's more about a lot of things other than accounting. So accounting is one part of your job, but really your job is about how you add value to an organization. And I think that was a very big difference from what one normally sees. And at least for me, that was very apt and very important advice that I got. And fortunately, when I moved out into the industry, I joined a company, this was ITC, which also promoted this way of looking at things, and did not expect people who came from an accounting background to be pure accountants. And going forward, moving into a CFO role then, I think this played a very big role, because if you're going to be a CFO, there are so many other things you're looking at, and accounting is a very small part of that. And realizing that, and then taking actions in those directions is what makes your leap from being a junior finance resource to being a CFO. It was not about being a pure accountant, and obviously that was one option that one had, but obviously that's not something that takes you to being a CFO. So if my aspirations were to be a CFO somewhere along the line, there were so many other skills that one acquired while at Deloitte, whether they were communication skills or whether they were just the skills of how you looked at the big picture rather than looking at very micro level issues, while not ignoring them, a lot of eye for detail, and yet looking at the big picture. That made a big difference. I think two things, or maybe three perhaps. Perhaps before that, one thing that I missed out, which definitely made a big impact for me, and was about ethics and ethical behavior. And that was a big learning for me. Deloitte was very heavy on ethics, and I'm sure it is even now. That was a very big learning for me. But coming back to your question, I think at Deloitte, one of the things was about networking and relationships. Some very uh, great relationships that one developed and which have carried on for so many years since then. Uh, and therefore, all the people and your colleagues at that time, you see them doing so well across. And so that's one thing that I would definitely would repeat it whenever that happens. But the other one was about the practical training that one received. That was also absolutely top class, as I said earlier, as compared to any of the other firms at that time. It was a great foundation for anybody who was doing CA. Three, four things I would say. One is obviously about communication, which I think is a very big differentiator. Uh, Beyond that, it's about having a vision, obviously, whether in your function or if you are heading a company, then for the company and its business. Uh, Also, very strong analytical skills and decision making, quick decision making, uh, and being very decisive is very critical for any good leader.